Joining me now is Johnny C. Taylor Jr., President and Chief Executive Officer of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, the largest HR association in the world. As a member of the White House American Workforce Policy Advisory Board and chair of the President's Advisory Board on historically black colleges and universities, Johnny Taylor is a sought-after voice on all matters affecting work. Thanks so much for joining us, Johnny. You know, this is called the Future of Jobs Summit, but it could equally be called Jobs of the Future Summit. And as you sort of think about the tension between our incumbent workforce and where we need to go, I know that HR, that job training, that the social contract between companies and their employees is a key part. I'd love to understand from you how we need to think about orienting how we get to those jobs of the future.
Well, so a couple of issues, and thank you for having me here. The first is, this is going to be a long slog, and it's going to be made worse by the pandemic, the loss of learning. So in some ways, we have an upskilling conversation, which I want to have, that really focuses on current employees whose jobs have changed or will change significantly over the next 5 years, such that they are not going to be useful if they are not upskilled and reskilled. But we also have a future workforce problem. Think about it. For the last year, in some cases as much as a year and a half, K through 12 schooling, as we know it, traditionally has not been occurring. And so what we're going to have is a real problem 5, 7, 10 years from now, when those children now become our future workers and they won't have known even the basics. Forget upskilling into a job. We're going to have some basic reading, writing, and arithmetic problems. So this is where we finally have come to the realization that it's not just the employee's responsibility, it is the employer's responsibility. It's a joint responsibility to ensure that we have a sufficient, highly qualified and well-trained workforce of the future.
So you have written and commented, I love your Twitter feed, you've talked a lot that we can't afford to leave talent on the table. We can't afford to exclude folks from the workforce, that the demands for talent are so high. You know, what are some of the practices that SHRM puts in place so that employers can reach people where they are, and as you just said, bring them along, because we have some basic education problems out in the country and we need to upskill, but you know, sometimes squaring all these circles, if that's a term, is hard to do.
Well, so one is companies, more and more employers are realizing they have an obligation to build bridges to the K through 12 system. We've got to ensure that this future workforce is not only ready to do what we need them to do, but have the right mindset about coming into a knowledge-based economy that really values innovation and also teamwork and those sorts of life-ready skills, right? So one, employers are reaching back much earlier in the process, and not just interviewing at college campuses, but going all the way into middle and high schools to get students prepared. When you think about the workforce as we think about it, like and people don't think about this perfect storm, right? You've got a hot economy. The American birth rate has been on a decline since the year 2000. We've had fewer and fewer babies. And I jokingly say, while millennials we need them to have children, they're having pets, right? And we need babies. So the reality is, if every American had a kid today who was capable of having children today, we wouldn't be able to solve for our talent needs for another 18 to 20 years, because they have to grow up and be educated and then come into the workforce. So what we've got to do is focus very much on 3 groups in particular within this world of untapped pool of talent. First of all, the formerly incarcerated. This is not a feel-good thing. We have an obligation to figure out how to cast our nets a little more widely. And it includes people who may have had brushes with the law, and even in some instances served time in a correctional facility, but we can't just write them off. That's 700,000 people per year who are going to come out of the country's prisons and jails every year. And that's a source for us. Okay, number one. Number two, older workers. We have written off people. Once you turn 45, the world says you're old, and everyone wants these young kids to come into the workforce, realizing, one, there are fewer of them, but secondly, they don't have the experience that comes with waking up every day. So we've got to cast, once again, instead of just running, think about it, the coding academies. They're all focused on young people. Why not go to the 45-year-old and say, we're going to teach you how to code, because you can be in the workforce and are likely to be in the workforce for at least another 15, 20 years. That's another area. And then finally, an area that we've got to be far more cognizant about is veterans. Like, we are every year bringing people who've served our country back out of active duty service into the workplace, and we're saying your skills don't match, so we're not hiring them. So those are three areas that I think if we are very intentional about recruiting from untapped pools of talent, we can help solve for the country's coming and growing war for talent.
That's very informative. We have Jim McKelvey on later in the program, who helped launch Code, whose one of the explicit purposes was to take middle-aged workers, people who had had a rough time in their life, and turn them into world-class coders that are not just, the younger crowd. So I'm really happy to hear you dovetailing with that. Johnny, you're a member of the White House American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. What are some of the big truths that you've helped the White House understand about how to be better when it comes to working with workforce issues?
Well, the one is that you mentioned right from the beginning that, heretofore and in times past, what we've really thought about upskilling was the employee's problem. It's portable. So me getting you graduate education or getting you new skills doesn't benefit me, it benefits you. And what we've had to do and spend a lot of time with the former administration emphasizing, and employers were there, Jenny Rometty at IBM, Tim Cook from Apple, we were all sitting around the table, the 25 of us, saying, this is a joint accountability. It's not enough to leave it up to employees to retool themselves. We have got to invest time, money, energy into ensuring that we help bridge that gap, because ultimately in a knowledge-based economy, if we don't have enough people to do our jobs, then it limits our competitiveness long time. Globally, for this country in particular, we can't compete. Think about it. The biggest populations of people are sitting in China and India. If America is going to compete, we've got to figure out how to make sure that we have a robust, highly qualified talent workforce. The other thing that we talked a lot about in the Workforce Policy Advisory Board was this conversation around enlarging the pool of candidates. And so traditionally we've gone out and we look for people who have college degrees. It's a proxy for smart. And we really challenged the notion as an advisory board to the White House to say, do all of these jobs need formal education? Do all of them need, or even, should we even say, many of them don't even, it's not even a preference. So they've gone from bachelor's degree required to bachelor's degree preferred. And we've said the answer might be, don't mention a bachelor's degree at all, because that job doesn't require it. That was a big lesson that we shared and came up with an innovation, I think, in some ways, during the work of the White House Policy Advisory Board, Workforce Policy Advisory Board.
Well, Johnny Taylor, President and CEO of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. I could talk to you all day about credentialing. I could talk to you all day about building empathy in this country. You've talked about our need to walk in each other's shoes and to think about each other more. Really appreciate the contributions you make on this front. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, my friend. Enjoyed it.